What are some serial killer facts/facts about serial killers that you find extremely interesting? Dennis Rader, aka BTK, Bind, Torture, Kill, started communicating with police after years of silence in like 2004-ish. He had gone decades without being caught and once again started sending taunting letters and items to them. He asked them if he could be traced if he sent them in writings on a floppy disk, and they assured him through a communication in a newspaper that the answer was no. They could not trace him. He sent them a floppy disk and they found metadata linking him to his church. He was arrested shortly thereafter. He was hurt that they would lie to him because he thought that they had developed a rapport. Number 2. The serial killer Bella Kiss liked to pickle people in barrels stored in his basement. Someone figured it out, but they couldn't get him because he was fighting in World War I. By the time they tracked him down, he had disappeared and left a dead guy in his hospital bed. He supposedly joined the French Foreign Legion and deserted that too, and I think history loses track of him after that, with the exception of one possible sighting as a janitor in New York. But the janitor disappeared before anyone could confirm it. Number 3. The Golden State Killer, known at the time as the East Area Sexual Assaulter, would often break into the homes of couples, making the women tie up the man. He would stack dishes on the back of the man and threaten that if he heard the dishes fall, he would kill everyone in the house. Then he would sexually assault the woman repeatedly and ransack the house for hours. At a community meeting about this man, a macho man stood up and went on a rant about how a real man would never let such a thing happen to him or his wife. The sexual assaulter then proceeded to attack that same man and his wife soon after, meaning he was attending the community meeting about himself. Number 4. Durangel Vargas killed and ate at least 10 people. He only ate men because he said their meat tasted better than women's. He also wouldn't eat fat people because he thought they contained too much cholesterol. Journalist Vlado Teneski was caught when he reported on his own crimes and included information that hadn't been released to the public, and only the killer can know it. Edit. More info on Teneski. Of the 4 women who disappeared, 3 were found to be displaying signs of being viciously sexually assaulted, molested, and tortured before being strangled to death with a phone cord. Though the police had initially revealed that the woman had been strangled, they had not said with what. Noticing that Teneski had correctly named the specific type of phone cord that was used, they arrested him on suspicion of murder. After questioning him, they obtained a search warrant for his home. His house was filled with pornography and notes about the crimes. He had been carrying out the murders, then writing about them in great detail for the paper, as if taunting the police. Number 5. Jeffrey Dahmer. Towards the end, right before he got caught, he had so many bodies in his apartment that he ran out of room and stored one victim in his bathtub. He proceeded to shower over him every day for a month. Think about that. Straddling over a rotten corpse to get fresh and clean for the day. Unreal. Number 6. Ted Bundy helped in the investigation of the Green River Killer and made a psych profile, which ended up being closer to the actual Green River Killer than the FBI's own psych profile themselves. That was also a huge part of the inspiration for Silence of the Lambs. Bundy also tried to pleasure himself to photos of his crime scene when Detective Keppel brought them in, which is why he stopped letting Bundy keep the files. Number 7. Silence of the Lambs came out in 1991, and one of the central plot elements is that the FBI is able to find the serial killer because they assume he lives in an isolated house of his own, because how else could he get away with kidnapping and murdering so many people? Then the Dahmer case breaks, and nope, the dude did his stuff in an apartment building where the neighbors were complaining about the smell of rotting meat, and the police eventually returned his victims to him. Number 8. I have a family member who briefly dated this guy, John Edward Robinson. She almost, but not quite fit the profile of his victims. One time when he picked her up, her adult son was visiting the house, met him, and shook his hand. He ghosted her after that. Also, my mom was living in a mobile home park in Wichita during BTK's killing spree. My dad was deployed overseas. They had a big German shepherd who she would put outside for a little bit every night before going to sleep. And she said for a while she had to bring him in early because he would just go crazy, barking, growling, and snarling every night. Shortly after he stopped doing that, there was a BTK murder not too far from the mobile home park. Scary stuff. Some older homes in Wichita have a second landline installed by the door because he was notorious for cutting phone lines. People would come home and check the line by the door, then the other line just to reassure themselves. Number 9. Richard Koklinski killed a man and left his body in an oil drum outside of a diner just to see how long it would take for someone to investigate. He would order sandwiches from the place and sit on the drum while he ate. He also made a clicking noise with his mouth when he was angry. If you heard that, you are as good as dead. If you like serial killers, UFOs, conspiracy theories, and stuff like that, I can't recommend Last Podcast on the Left enough. It's insanely informative and also funny. Kuklinski is my favorite episode by them. Number 10. When police eventually came to the house of Ed Gein, they found an absolute pigsty. Gein had been living alone since the death of his brother in a barn fire. It's speculated that Gein may have killed him and had let much of the house go into disrepair. They found countless body parts from his various grave-digging excursions, including a bag of wilted vaginas, and of course, the infamous skin lampshade and half-finished woman suit made of human skin. There were maggots living in old dishes in the kitchen. It was the type of disorganized mess you would expect from a man who spent his nights completely disconnected from reality. All except one room. His mother's room upstairs remained pristine, except for dust that had collected, and seemingly was untouched from the time of her death years earlier. He had such a fear or respect for his mother that he was afraid to set foot in her room long after she had died. He claimed to hear her voice criticizing him from time to time. This was the central experience that inspired Norman Bates' character to maintain his mother's home/image in Psycho. Also, a fun fact about Gein, in Taxi Driver, Travis Bickle makes an offhand comment about when leaving a diner that he had a cup of coffee and a slice of apple pie with cheese on top. In exchange for details to investigators after his capture, Gein requested the same meal. Number 11. In the Zodiac Killer case, the number one suspect, Arthur Lee Allen, had a lot of circumstantial evidence suggesting he was the killer. Enough for him to be certainly the Zodiac Killer, but he was never apprehended due to the evidence coming out as negative. Circumstantial evidence. He lived in Viejo near a couple of the murders. He took one sick day off of work a day after one of the suspected murders happened. His mother gave him a Zodiac watch for Christmas, which had the same symbol. He was incredibly smart and had knowledge about fingerprints and DNA and may have planted false evidence. He spoke with his friend before the Zodiac murders, Don Cheney, about writing a novel about a man named Zodiac who killed couples at random with a gun and a torch attached to it, and taunt the police with letters. He told the police he was going to Lake Berryessa on the day of one of the murders happening, but went to the coast instead. Also admitted to having bloody knives in his car on the day of that murder, which he claimed he killed a chicken. The boot print left at one of the crime scenes had the same shoe size as Allen and was Wing Walker military boot. Allen had been in the Navy before. He was supposedly able to write with his left hand and print with his right hand, in which the Zodiac letters are written in. And a surviving victim picked his face out of a lineup in 1991. And the evidence gets weirder. He was arrested in 1974 for child molestation and released in 1977. There were no Zodiac letters sent during this period. He was a school teacher and was fired in 1968 because he molested some of his students. And in one of the letters, he threatened to kill school children. He wanted to be a bouncer at his friend Ralph Spinelli's nightclub, but he wouldn't let him. He told him he will go to San Francisco to kill a cabbie. That night, Paul Stein, a cab driver, was shot point blank in the head. Multiple search warrants were made against Allen in the early 90s, and the search conducted found bombs and formulas for bombs, which were identical to the ones found in the Zodiac letters. An unidentified man named Lee was known to associate with one of the victims, and Allen always went by his middle name. He died in August 1992, a month before he was meant to meet up with investigators about the case. Evidence against him. He was overweight, and a witness says Allen was not the man they saw on the night of the Paul Stein murder. Fingerprints did not match, and a palm print found on a letter did not match either. DNA did not match on a stamp licked. Allen had a habit for getting other people to lick his stamps because the glue made him sick. And no one was ever arrested during the Zodiac case. Number 12. Mark Brendan Reed, aka Chopper, was a renowned killer in Australia. However, he only targeted drug dealers and people who made attempts on his life. When he got old, he was told he had liver cancer and only a few weeks to live. He was asked by the television show 60 Minutes in Australia if he wanted one last interview before he died. He accepted. When asked about all the murders, which he previously claimed as self-defense, not him or he covered them up, just confessed to all of them, claiming they were never self-defense and he had committed the ones he previously denied. Then he passed away a few weeks later. Went out listing everyone he killed. It shocked everyone. I would suggest looking him up. He's very interesting. Number 13. That some of them kill just because they enjoy doing it. Like a person might enjoy fishing or having a nice meal, some people just kill others because they enjoy it in some way. The interview with author Shawcross really stuck with me, as he described the people he killed and was so calm and nonchalant about it, like it was something he did as commonly as using the bathroom or eating a meal. 14. Brazilian serial killer Little Petey murdered over 40 people in prison. He began by murdering the gang that killed his girlfriend, and then stabbing his father, who was in prison for killing his mother during a visit. He was well liked because he was considered a sort of vigilante avenger, despite killing indiscriminately within prison. No difference between drug possession and a murder. Because of Brazil's odd sentencing laws, he could only serve a maximum of 30 years, and is currently a YouTuber and a ranch hand, I think. 15. My grandmother met Ted Bundy on her college campus, and he attempted to get her friend to go off with him. My grandmother said she got a bad vibe from him because he was such a happy person, and she felt like he was forcing the emotion a bit much. Her friend, however, wanted to go with him and was completely blinded by his charm. My grandmother took her friend by the hand and walked away. She said his face changed completely as they did. It's crazy to me that with charm and looks alone, girls were willing to go with him, even after several had gone missing or had been found dead. Number 16. Many years ago, I read the entire police report on the Green River Killer. I was fascinated by his attempts to cover his tracks by buying new car tires and destroying shoes and getting new ones after murders to avoid leaving traceable tracks behind. Also fascinating that he took the jewelry off his victims and left it in the ladies' restroom at his workplace and got off on seeing the found jewelry on various women around the office. 17. Dr. Harold Shipman. He lost his mother watching how morphine eased her pain before she passed. Then he became a doctor, using morphine overdoses to kill people, especially rich old ladies, and wrote himself into their wills with forgery. He was eventually caught because it was suspicious that every single one of his patients had him in their will, and that they all died under his care, but he did inherit a number of estates and a lot of money before getting caught. Number 18. Theodore Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was an absolute genius. I wrote a research paper on him for my forensics class. He was a math genius, graduated high school at like 15, went to Harvard, had multiple rewards for his math. He was also part of the government's MK Ultra experiments. Some people believe that his participation in the project is why he went insane and moved into the woods and started mailing people bombs. He didn't know what the project was, he was just told it was a small social program for geniuses. Dude is a sad case of a genius mind turning evil because of bad philosophy. Number 19. The fact that all one has to do is kill in 2 different jurisdictions. Police don't often randomly share cases or ask for help, reasons being ego or that they want credit for the caller. So, if a murder happens in a different police jurisdiction, the chances of solving it drop significantly. There's also the fact that killers don't always have some super specific signature they leave, so victims aren't connected to the same killer. Source: Pat Brown, a profiler. She does a great job debunking the super smart, cool, charming stereotypes serial killers get because cops don't want to be seen as incompetent or catching the killers by sheer luck, which an uncomfortable amount are. Number 20. The most recent one I've studied that stuck with me is Gary Ridgway. The guy got away with life in prison by giving away the spots where his victims were buried and made the police take him back to the sites to relive the crimes over again. In the court videos, he just sits like a deer in headlights as families of his victims tell him he'll burn in hell and other very nasty things, understandably. But the father of one of his victims was hardcore Christian, and he got up to the stand and said, "Despite everything you've heard today, I believe in Jesus Christ's teachings, and he believes in forgiveness, and sir, I forgive you." And it brought the serial killer to tears, which the judge told him he didn't have a right to fake any form of guilt, which he clearly didn't have. 21. Edmund Kemper, the co-ed killer. Please Google him, but not before or after eating. He is just a really crazy dude. Apart from the fact that he was nearly 7 feet tall, the main thing that stuck out to me was that he was so smart. That only 6 years after killing both his paternal grandparents and being diagnosed as criminally insane, he convinced psychiatrists he was rehabilitated. Before he went on a violent killing spree and then turned himself in, totally of his own volition, as the police had no idea who he was. 22. Dean Corll, also known as the Candyman, was a serial killer who had 2 teenage accomplices. He repeatedly paid them to lure other teenage boys to his house for him to kill. The really fascinating part is how it all ended up going down. Pretty much, his one accomplice, Elmer Wayne Henley Jr., was out looking for victims one night, when instead he ran into a female friend whose father had been abusing her. Henley ended up taking her and a male friend to Coral's home in order to escape the abuse. As expected, Coral wasn't too excited about a girl being brought because he usually/exclusively killed boys. So Henley and his two friends wake up tied up. Coral says that he's going to kill them all, but Henley manages to talk his way into getting untied so he can help Coral kill the others instead. Before anything happens though, Henley grabs Coral's gun and pretty much refuses to harm the girl, saying that Coral's gone too far this time. Coral starts goading Henley, saying that he won't shoot him. Henley does in fact shoot him. He ends up untying the two other teens, who ended up telling Henley to call the police. During the call, Henley admits to shooting Coral, and he goes on to confess to everything when the investigation into Coral and the shooting begins. And probably the craziest part of the story is what Henley said to his male friend while waiting for the police to show. He said, "If you weren't my friend, I could have gotten $200 for you." 23. Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, was actually interviewed 9 times during the investigation, but the police discounted him each time because he had the wrong accent. Some hoaxer had sent a number of letters and a recording claiming to be the Ripper, and the police were looking for a guy with a Geordie, Newcastle accent rather than Sutcliffe's Yorkshire accent. The hoax is believed to have cost 3 more women's lives, because it was only when he confessed to the murders in 1981 that Sutcliffe was finally caught and the recording was proven to be fake. The hoaxer was named John Humble, and he was sentenced to 8 years in prison in 2006 for it. I just want to point out that I have no narrator's commentary. I lied. Like, how do I relate to this? How do you people in the comments relate to this? Do you guys know any serial killers? Because I don't, that I know of, and I plan to keep it that way. Anyway, I'm done. Bye.